Hey Vault Hunters, Constant Canadian here with my first build video in 4.5 years, and I've got a really special one for you today. So if you enjoy this video or build, be sure to leave a like and subscribe as it really helps out the channel. Now, before we get into the actual skill trees and gear, let's talk about what this build is and what it isn't. This build isn't going to one-shot every single boss in the game. However, this build is insanely powerful and capable of beating all endgame content on Mayhem 11 with ease. This build isn't reliant on the Revolter or Guardian Angel, any DLC, or even Guardian ranks for that matter. And this build is both great at mobbing and bossing. Now on to our skill trees. Starting off in the green tree, we have 3 points in personal space for the extra 54% gun damage. This gun damage is multiplicative with all other gun damage bonuses, which makes it an absolute no-brainer for easy damage. 2 points in route to rise to move down the tree. Next, we've got 5 points into arms deal. This helps a lot with bossing as we primarily use a rocket launcher for that or the Sandhawk, both of which do splash damage. Moving on to tier 3 now, we've got +3 in mindfulness and +3 in vigor. This is a spiritual driver build, so any extra movement speed is a must. We're also going to pick up the Blight Tiger augment for a corrosive action skill. Moving on to the blue tree, we're going to pick up phase cast here, as well as 1 point in both do harm and violent tapestry, as well as 3 into fast hands, solely to move down the tree. This build isn't going to be doing much with rush stacks, so we don't have to focus too much on those. This is also where we will pick up soul sap for a delayed lifesteal, as well as where we'll max out alacrity for the slight increase to reload speed, transcend for the bonus critical damage, and restless for the bonus cooldown rate. We're also going to put 1 point into Ascendant to slightly improve Soul Sap's healing, and 3 points into Wrath and Do Harm for even more damage. Now this build does actually have 1 extra point that realistically can be spent anywhere, so I put it in From Rest to get a slightly faster charge speed. We're also going to put a simple 1 into Remnant because Remnant is insanely broken, and 1 into Avatar for reasons we'll get into later. Onto the red tree, we will be putting 5 into Anima for double the status effect duration. Again, it's a driver build, so that's very useful. We are going to skip infusion here because we will be using corrosive weapons, so it'll hurt more than it'll help. In tier 2, we'll put 5 points into Tempest for the extra elemental damage, as well as 5 into Wildfire to help spread around some status effects, so we can get a little bit more rush stacks and thus reload speed from Alacrity. Dread is pointless here as we're using phase cast, but we will max out both Indiscriminate for ricochets and put 1 point into Deep Wall for a slight increase to magazine size. We are going to take 1 point into Catharsis as well, simply for more area damage, as well as 3 in Sustainment for lifesteal, and 2 in Conflux to get a little bit more damage from the Guardian rank perk Harmageddon, which we don't rely on, but is still a real nice source of extra damage. Unlike Infusion, Forceful Expression is just straight up extra damage with no real downsides, so we'll put a point in that as well. Moving on to the gear, starting with our class mod. Naturally, it's a driver build. We need to have the spiritual driver. The only stats that matter on the driver class mod for this build is +3 to mindfulness and the bonus to action skill cooldown, which we will get into why later. As for our artifact, we have an elemental projector Victory Rush. This artifact gives us even more V2 damage from the Victory Rush, as well as even more movement speed and the bonus 129% corrosive damage whenever we have a corrosive status effect applied to us, which should be always. The most important parts for the artifact here is the elemental projector and the cooldown rate. This is actually the god roll artifact for this build, but you can make do with even a purple elemental projector. And realistically, you could actually go without the cooldown rate on the artifact here, but if you don't have it, your timing needs to be damn near perfect for phase cast. Moving on to the shield, you can use pretty much any shield you want with this build. You just need to make sure it has the action skill and 50% cooldown rate for a short time anointment. With this anointment, plus Restless and the other cooldown rate stat bonuses we have, the cooldown of phase cast will be under the 10-second mark, which is very important for this build. I chose the Transformer here for simplicity, but again, any shield you like will work. The best shields would probably be a Corrosive Old God or a low-level Revolter. Again, neither are necessary for this build, but both would absolutely take this build to the sky. As for the grenade mod, again, this is pretty much up to personal preference. I used the It's Piss grenade for bonus damage on command, but the Hex also works good for healing if you need it, and the Quasar could be decent for pulling enemies close together. The only real recommendation I have for this build in terms of weapons is the Reflux. The Reflux absolutely destroys any mobbing section with this setup and is 100% your best weapon for mobbing. We've also got a Hive, Plague Bearer, and Backburner for bossing, as well as a Breath of the Dying, Hornet, and Sandhawk. Due to the nature of this build, there's sometimes one enemy left after you clear the battlefield. So these weapons are here for single target damage, though pretty much any good corrosive weapon would work for this, like the Lucian's Call or the Butcher. We also have a fire needle gun too. This is just for corrosive immune enemies like corrosive heavies or the tenderizer. As for the anointments on all of your weapons, you're going to want the Phase Cast 250% weapon damage anointment. This anointment only lasts for around 10 seconds, meaning that with a slower cooldown rate, it's off more than it's on. But thanks to our stacked cooldown rate and sub 10-second cooldown, this anointment should realistically have zero downtime provided you're casting as soon as you can. So basically the way this build works is you use Phase Cast, you put a corrosive dot on yourself, and you get the 10 seconds of 250% bonus weapon damage, as well as the 129% extra elemental damage from your artifact. At this point, just run and shoot stuff and you'll pretty much destroy everything in your path. Thanks to our various bonuses to cooldown rate, we will have Phase Cast back and should never have any downtime on the driver or the Phase Cast anointment. Realistically, this build doesn't even need Avatar in the blue tree, but we will use it for keeping our Phase Cast anoint up when swapping weapons, which is incredibly useful. According to my math, which could be wrong, corrosive gun damage will have an up to 40 times multiplier before it hits the enemy with this build, which is absolutely insane. One small tip for this build, if you plan on running Guardian Takedown with it, stand as far away as possible from any ledges. For some reason in Borderlands 3, increasing your movement speed also increases the distance enemies knock you back, so Guardians can very easily push you off the edge. But enough talk, you want to see what this build is capable of.